Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Gas prices are on the rise as the conflict in Iran stretches into its fourth week. And what to know about a lawsuit that aims to block a first-of-its-kind tax on social media companies. First off tonight, Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke is launching a new task force focused on CTA-related crimes and prosecutions. In an email to her staff today, she says, quote, "Reducing crime on public transportation is now a top priority. While other categories of violent crime dropped last year, violent offenses committed on public transit increased. Safe public transportation is essential for thriving communities." The new task force will consist of 36 assistant state's attorneys from different bureaus who will receive specialized training with the CTA and Chicago Police Department to strengthen transit-related prosecutions. Additionally, her office will ask courts to restrict access to transit systems and property for defendants who are not detained pre-trial. The state's attorney already has a policy of seeking pre-trial detention for all violent crimes committed along the CTA. While issuing his third veto in less than a year, Mayor Brandon Johnson started off with a Bible verse before striking out an ordinance that would reverse the planned phase-out of the minimum wage for tipped workers.
Woe unto the rich who have denied the wages to the workers. Warning to the rich who denied wages to the workers. But the good thing about that scripture, because clearly they were denying their wages. But if you keep reading, the Bible says that I hear the cries of the workers.
A week ago, the City Council voted to reverse its 2023 plan that would gradually increase the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers. It'll take 34 alderpeople to override the mayor's veto. A vote on that is scheduled for April 15th. For more on the debate over the sub-minimum wage, you can visit our website. Downtown drivers and pedestrians will finally be able to cruise across the State Street Bridge again starting this weekend. The Chicago Department of Transportation says it's reopening over the Chicago River starting Friday after finally wrapping a major rehabilitation project. CDOT says the work included replacing the bridge's center brake that had caused damage to the roadway during periods of extreme heat, as well as a full rehab of its center locks and replacement of the viaduct sidewalk. The updates began back in April 2025 and took a little longer than expected because of additional steel repairs found during construction. The city is unveiling its newly named snowplows today, including Abolish ICE. Mayor Johnson used the event as an opportunity to once again condemn President Donald Trump's mass deportation efforts and the presence of immigration enforcement at airports where dozens of ICE agents are now deployed in an effort to fill gaps for TSA. Abolish ICE has become a popular refrain for those opposed to the agency's tactics and want to see it dismantled. The other winners of the 4th annual snowplow naming contest are Stephen Coldbear, Pope Frio the 14th, the Blizzard of Oz, Sven Cooley, and Caleb Chilliams. But hopefully we won't see any of them again for a while. Up next, gas prices are up and fueling a debate on economic policy right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
If you've been to a gas station lately, you already know it is costing you more. As of today, gas prices in Cook County reached an average of $4.50 per gallon. It comes as the war in Iran continues to threaten oil shipments around the world. Joining us to discuss more in depth are Brian Thompson, a professor of economics at DePaul University, Molly Hart, a spokeswoman at AAA, And on Zoom, Nate Harris, CEO of the Illinois Fuel and Retail Association. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Molly Hart, let's start with you, please. How have gas prices changed in Chicago over the last month?
Gas prices have jumped. As a matter of fact, from a week ago today, it's gone up 30 cents. A month ago, we've jumped up to $1.30. So gas prices are rising. It's due to the conflict in Iran.
Jumped up by $1.30
Correct,
from a
yes.
month ago. How would you
Yes.
say that compares to this time last year?
This time last year, we were not seeing these prices at all. But gas prices do go up at this time of year, and that's because we're switching over from the winter blend to the summer blend, which is more expensive to make. Refineries go into refineries do seasonal maintenance, so they're not producing at full capacity for a couple weeks. So we do see that uptick. This is a big uptick. And then additionally, spring, people are getting in the car, going for spring break, and then some are doing their summer vacations.
Right.
More
and
people on the roads.
And planning for them, yes. I've got spring break next week myself.
Yes.
Nate Harris, over to you. How do gas station owners, how do they calculate or decide where to set prices for a gallon of gas?
Yeah, thanks for having me. They don't really decide what the price of oil is going to be. So it all depends on the global market. Like was mentioned before, the conflict with Iran has caused the oil prices to jump up. And so when you take the price of the oil plus all of the costs with refining it, transporting it, getting it into pipelines, and then eventually getting it into the gas stations itself, then the gas stations have to run a business. They have to pay property taxes. They have to make a little bit of a profit, and then include the about $1 in taxes from state, local, and federal officials. All of that goes into the price that you see on the board as you drive past.
And then Illinois, we currently have higher average gas prices than surrounding states. Nate, why is that?
Well, a lot of that is due to the motor fuel taxes. Most of the same fuel that we use here in Illinois is the same that they use in Indiana. The Chicagoland and the St. Louis metro area do have a special blend, but most of the difference in the price is due to taxes.
Thank you. Brian Thompson, what factors influence the price of oil globally?
Well, I mean, it's economic related, right? So it's about, thinking about where the economy is going in the future, where interest rates are going in the future. But like any other market, it's supply and demand. And so if you expect there to be less supply, that can raise prices. If there's less demand in the future, that can bring prices back down. So it's very market driven.
Why have we seen gas prices jump so quickly?
It's very behavioral, right? So like what you tend to see is on the bad news that prices go up very quickly, and then when things start to recover and prices start to come down, it comes down much slower. And so it's very behavioral. It is the fact that everyone's kind of trying to make a market and figure out where prices are going to be in the future, and there's a lot that goes into that.
Nate, how do gas station owners, how did they respond in the early days of the conflict with Iran?
Yeah, they had their prices reflect what the global market was doing. So as the price of oil jumped, the price of gas followed behind. Now it's not an exact correlation, but it's generally as one goes up, the other goes up as well in the same manner.
Can we expect this to keep happening, just prices to keep climbing?
I do think so. As long as the conflict is going on, I think the price of oil is going to increase, which will therefore increase the price of motor fuel, whether it's gas or diesel.
Molly, how might these high gas prices factor into people's decisions to travel? We were talking about, planning for summer break, spring break, which is happening for a lot of folks right now.
Sure, they're going to just budget differently for the most part. If they were maybe going to go away for a week this summer, they might only do 4 days. If they're going to stay at a hotel, they might stay at a less expensive hotel, maybe go to casual dining instead of fine dining. But there's tips you can also do, which is take any extra cargo out of your car for fuel economy. If you have a bike rack and you're not using it, take it off. If you're doing errands, combine them into one. If you have a friend or a family that needs to do it too. All of these are just going to help put a little bit of money back into your wallet.
What about the, choosing between flying versus driving, right? Because I think we can expect the same out of airlines, which I'm going to come to one of you on as well.
Right, and I think you need to look into what the price of a flight is. They might be going up they are going up as well. So it's a matter of the distance and how much you'll be paying for gas as well as what the airfare is.
Brian, I guess on that point, tell us a little bit more about how oil and gas prices are connected to other parts of the economy. How else are we feeling the impact of gas prices?
Sure. Like this moment in time is really kind of defined by what we call this K economy, where there's people that are doing really well, people that invest in the stock market, people whose jobs are seeing higher wages. They're benefiting from the environment, so they're not as affected. But there's also people that are very sensitive to prices and sensitive to changes in the economy, and those people are much more exposed to this environment that we're currently experiencing.
Are there not other ways that, purchases that we all have to make, right? The food that we eat, the stuff we buy in stores, it's got to go on a truck to get to the store where I'm going to buy it, and that truck is running on diesel.
And we're seeing those prices, and a lot of the things with the tariffs that from previous that were mentioned previously, all that kind of is fueled into the economy slowly but surely, and then now we're just seeing it, more holistically.
Nate, are there concerns about possible gas shortages in the U.S.?
Not that I've heard. This is not a supply problem. This is a uncertainty and volatility problem.
How does this compare to previous, problems or energy crises that we've experienced?
The most recent one I can think of was there was an increase when Russia went to war with Ukraine. This is much bigger than that. I'm not an expert much beyond that, but I have heard that this is one of the worst crises we've had.
Same question to you, Brian. How do you think this compares to other energy crises or gas woes we've had? Well,
it's the uncertainty, as Nate said. We're experiencing a lot of uncertainty, which makes it difficult for businesses to predict what they're going to do with regards to pricing and what they think demand is going to be in the travel industry. Will people travel? Will they not travel? All that uncertainty makes it very difficult to plan, and so that makes it more difficult for people to price, and that affects demand over time.
If the conflict in Iran were to end, say tomorrow, would gas prices drop as quickly as they rose? I
don't think so. I think that because we are in this very headline experienced environment, we don't necessarily always believe that things are going to be the way we expect, and so I think we'd want to see more certainty over time, and I think that would take more time to see prices come down.
Okay. Molly, how can individuals sort of cut down on their gas bills? You mentioned some folks are going to be budgeting differently.
They're going to be budgeting differently, and you can use our AAA mobile app, and it's going to show you different gas stations and the price, so you can choose the one that has the lowest price at the pump. Again, there's other savings, like I said, to do your errands in one round. And then if people are planning on traveling or getting on a plane, you probably, this summer or for fall, you probably want to book now, because some of the airlines are also talking about reducing flights. So you want to get on that plane and enjoy your trip.
Maybe carpool.
And carpool is always a good one, yes.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. Best of luck to everybody out there. Brian Thompson, Molly Hart, and Nate Harris. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the tech industry is pushing back against the city's social media amusement tax. We're going to have more on that in just a moment. The tech industry is pushing back against the city's social media amusement tax that Mayor Johnson has staked $31 million worth of city revenue on. The measure requires social media companies to pay 50 cents a month for every active user beyond the first 100,000. Companies including X, Facebook, and TikTok began paying the tax last month, but NetChoice argues the tax violates tech companies' right to free speech. Joining us to discuss the lawsuit are 6th Ward Alderman William Hall, who represents communities like Chatham, Auburn Gresham, and parts of Inglewood. And on Zoom, Patrick Hedger, NetChoice's Director of Policy. Welcome back. Thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Patrick Hedger, over to you first. As we mentioned, NetChoice is arguing that the mayor's tax violates the free speech rights of the social media companies that it targets. Describe that part of NetChoice's lawsuit, please. How so?
Yeah, so there is already Supreme Court precedent about this, that governments cannot target specific forms of media for special taxation. You look to the Minneapolis Star Tribune case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court in the 1980s, and they put in place a tax on ink. So any newspaper that used over $100,000 in ink had to pay an excise tax. Very similar to the details here in this case, where you have an arbitrary size threshold and a tax on a specific form of media, patently unconstitutional. And then you have a federal law issue with the Permanent Internet Tax Freedom Act, which says that you essentially cannot discriminate against an online service simply because it is an online service. That you would, any policy you would apply to an online platform would also have to apply to its offline equivalent. That's not the case with this tax.
Alderman Hall, you supported Mayor Johnson's budget proposal. We've talked about it a good bit here on this show. That was last fall. You've repeatedly called for large corporations to pay their fair share in taxes. But is there merit to the idea that a tax on social media companies for having more than 100,000 users is a tax on popular speech?
Well, let's first of all start the way that you started the segment. The companies already have been paying it. So my question is, if they are already in agreement with the fact that essentially this is an investment in mental health, then why is the outside group messing with inside business? At the end of the day, we know that social media companies are dangerous to those who use them. We just see right now in California lawsuits filed, victory won. We see here in the Cook County right now, we have lawsuits in which parents have filed against these companies for allowing the predators inside of the chat rooms. Again, social media. We also saw how social media companies questionably failed in protecting the life of a 14-year-old who was unfortunately killed because it was advertised on his platforms. So this tax is to protect our children. This tax is to protect families. And so again, the social media companies have already started paying. And so they understand the need to invest into our mental health system, which, by the way, we've opened up more mental clinics in the first 3 years than those that were closed in the last 4. And so, again, this is a commitment to mental health and wellness, because these social media companies, as much as they're informative, they also can be dangerous.
Patrick, what about that, the claim that the social media companies clearly agree because they are already paying? Is it a matter of them paying now to avoid being in violation as your organization fights this out on their behalf?
Yeah, that is correct. It is not to be in violation of the law until it is adjudicated. And I will remind the alderman that in the Supreme Court case, Minnesota Star Tribune, the Tribune was also paying that tax until it was found unconstitutional. And then the state of Minnesota had to issue them a refund. So just because somebody is paying into a tax that's unconstitutional does not therefore then make it lawful.
So as the alderman mentioned just today, a jury in LA found Meta and YouTube were both liable for, quote, engineered addiction leading to adverse mental health outcomes. The jury awarded that 20-year-old plaintiff who started using Facebook and YouTube at a young age $3 million in damages. Patrick, what is your reaction to that ruling?
Yeah, I think these cases are complicated and they will be appealed. And we've seen several legal experts weigh in and say that there are some very questionable items in these cases and that will have to be decided upon appeal. But I really worry about the floodgates of the trial bar going after speech platforms and ultimately the internet becoming a much less dynamic and a much quieter place and people losing access to valuable services.
Alderman, what do you think the broader impact of that decision could be?
Again, for the second time, who is this guy? We saw that social media companies have already started paying the tax in which it's used to pay for mental health clinics. I don't understand why it is that we are attacking the city through a form of a frivolous lawsuit to stop companies from investing in what is needed at this present time. Social media companies, again, have just been found liable in the damage of human life. And so, again, essentially what we're saying as a city is pay your fair share in what is an investment into the wellness of those who use these devices. This is not a tax, again, that is not reachable. It is not fair, because if it was so, then they would have filed the lawsuit. We didn't get these lawsuits from Meta. We didn't get a lawsuit from Facebook. We didn't get a lawsuit from TikTok and the others. It came from an outside group that's trying to impede upon inside taxes that are used to help our citizens in Chicago. Again, 5 mental clinics opened, and again, when we look at World War III on the verge of, an amount of time that people are using on their phones, it has been proven that not only has it messed up mental health, it has also helped to increase the damage on eyes. People are losing their sight plans with these phones for the amount of hours that they're doing. Look, I'm 41 years old, and I have to put limits on my social media just in case so that I don't use it too much. And so there's damage that has been done, damage that has been proven. Matter of fact, we supremely cumulative damages paid in California. So it's no ifs, ands, or buts about it that this tax is the third rail to protect Chicagoans and anyone that sees it as a necessity for their mental health.
I think there's also been some decision in this case, or part of this case is about how the feed works, right? Less about the content. Those companies have been protected and held not responsible, and Patrick can correct me if I'm wrong, about the content that people are seeing on some of these platforms. And to that point, then, why should social media companies bear the cost of the mental health challenges as a result of what's on their platforms? Additionally, when we know there's a lot that has to do with the mental health of our young people these days.
It's no different than the cigarette companies that for years they sold cigarettes with no warnings and people got cancer, and then we had to file major lawsuits to recuperate the cost of damages done to lives that were damaged by smoking cigarettes. It's no secret. Even the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, said this has gotten out of control. We never saw it being this dangerous for users. When I started using Facebook, I was in college. It was for college students only at DePaul, and that's how we communicated. It was a new way to innovate and essentially leave a message on the door like you would in the dorms. It has evolved to something that is dangerous. And it's dangerous to the point where not only are there user guides that are in place, but the user guides are not strong enough. This taxation is not against freedom of speech. This taxation is not against users. This taxation is to say that the investment needed to protect the warning signs that are not clearly strong enough for those who are using these devices, i.e. those on social media platforms.
Patrick, the $31 million that the city has projected from this tax, it is earmarked, as we've discussed, for mental health services in Chicago. Supporters say that social media contributes, as we've heard from the alderman, to mental health issues, particularly among young women, and argue that the social media companies should help fund those services. Do you think social media companies are doing enough to address the mental health challenges that are linked to this platform, and/or could they be doing more?
All of social media services offer strong and comprehensive online protections as well as parental controls. And there are parental controls available at every level of the internet stack, whether it's through your internet service provider, on your device, or on the platform. What we're not seeing enough of is the state and local governments contributing to online safety education. We know that kids and families are going to be online for the rest of their lives, and we ought to be educating people on how to use these services safely. But discriminatory taxation that risks services being pulled out of certain districts, and therefore small businesses and other valuable services losing access to those things, is not the right way to go.
NetChoice also argues that the social media amusement tax, it could increase costs for Chicago residents and businesses. How so?
Yeah, so we know a lot about corporate tax incidents, and these taxes are generally passed on to the consumer. And the consumer in this case that's actually paying for these services is small businesses that are advertising. Social media platforms have dramatically leveled the playing field for small businesses to be able to find their customers, and they can spend more money serving their customers and not as much money finding their customers. And so when you have a tax like this that may cause certain services to pull out of the city altogether, those small businesses end up suffering, or they end up paying more for the advertising they need to be able to compete.
Alderman Hall.
Well, Warren Buffett said, and things I learned before I sold my business, that the #1 way to advertise is still word of mouth. It comes with credibility, it comes with stories, it comes with testimonies. Again, we also must understand that modernity has an issue with equity. Not everybody has access to cell phones, #1, in inner cities as well as communities. So when we look at how do you grow small business, you grow small business by good product and by word of mouth. Testimonies is no different than what we see with Limbs, which is a James Beard Award winner in the 6th Ward. Word of mouth it's the best barbecue in the city. It's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can cut off a cell phone now, you can cut off social media, and people still have mouths, and they're still going to tell their experiences as small businesses. So again, the idea and the notion that small businesses will suffer because folks ain't on the internet, that's not true. We've had multi-million-dollar small businesses long before the internet. We will have it long after the internet. But though the internet is here, our tax is to say pay for the mental clinics, 5 of which we just opened up in the last 3 years under this mayor. Do your part in the investment of that. And when he talks about the notion of what we can do more, the more is essentially making sure that social media companies, are not out of control with the damage that they are doing.
Patrick, we've got under a minute left. Supporters say social media companies profit heavily from user data, and comparing the tax to similar taxes or mining companies for extracting natural resources from the earth, for example. What is your response to that argument?
Look, brick and mortar businesses rely on data too. If you have a pharmacy card or a shopper's card at your local grocery store, that is data that is used to offer you discounts and services. So again, that gets sort of back to the idea of the Permanent Internet Tax Freedom Act, signed by President Obama, son of Chicago, that we are not going to discriminate against a business just because it is an online business. And that is exactly what this tax does. And I would really heavily push back on the notion that that small businesses would be just fine without the ability to access these online platforms, because what these online platforms are is word of mouth. And that is critically important. I agree with the alderman on that, but limiting these channels for small businesses, again, to level the playing field against their much larger competitors who have access to broadcast is not fair.
All right, that is where we're going to have to leave it. Alderman William Hall and Patrick Hedger, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is our show for this Wednesday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Blue Sky at WTTW. Speaking of social media, join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Reaction from Chicago's Latino community to sexual abuse allegations against civil rights icon Cesar Chavez. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is a multilingual law firm providing translators for a variety of languages.